I've mentioned that it's basically a fool's errand to talk about which is the most difficult of these preludes to play. But in a very real way, the most crowd pleaser of the preludes is also the easiest technically. Not to execute, it's just as hard as all the others, but at least to understand the technique behind it, because it's really not much of a secret. You're just going to the gym with basic building blocks of scales and octaves. I mentioned Heinrich Neuhaus in the previous episode, and some other episodes as well. And he said something which I really think is correct and also kind of obvious. The most difficult thing to do at the piano, not in terms of like the music that you're trying to make, but in terms of just pure physical effort that you have to make, is to play very fast, very loud, for an extended period of time. And that's basically this piece. This is like, what, a minute and a half, depending on how athletic you are, of just nonstop, relentless loudness and speed in both hands. And because of that, and because the basic building blocks here are octaves and scales, you just, like I said, you just got to go to the gym. You slowly build up the strength and the endurance that you need to play the piece in that like chaotic, relentless way. So I don't really have too much to say in this episode. It's going to be kind of a short one, but let me just mention a couple of things in the right hand and the left hand, and then give you some tips for how to memorize this stream of notes. So first of all, the right hand. The right hand is just a bunch of scales. One long scale. This is one of the rare cases, in fact I think it's the only time where I actually use the metronome to practice. I'm not saying that's a good thing, it's just telling you how I practice. I really feel like the metronome here helps me quite a lot because I'm just trying to slowly ramp up the speed. So I start at a pretty slow tempo. And slowly ramp up that tempo. The metronome also helps to make sure that I'm actually playing very, very evenly. I don't know why, but maybe because of the speed, maybe because it's very loud. There are times, a couple of shapes where, I mean, you might have noticed it over here, where I feel like I'm not playing perfectly evenly. And this is kind of important in this piece. I don't really feel like there's a lot of tug and pull in the rhythm in the right hand. So making sure with the metronome that you're playing, well, metronomically, but also that you're really digging into the bottom of the key bed. I've mentioned this so many times before. Somewhat paradoxically, the faster you play, the more important it is to take the time to play to the bottom of the key bed to really have a very full sound. If you're just skimming on the top of the keys, you won't get that, well, again, that very full sound. So put the metronome on, slowly ramp up the speed, make sure that you're playing to the bottom of the key bed and you're playing nice and loud. I do want to mention one thing that I'm not very sure about. I feel like the right hand here is doing just it's just a finger exercise, finger strength. I don't know if I've really talked about this before, but it's a pretty well-known, I guess fact. At the piano you can think of your whole body as consisting of a bunch of like levers, pulleys, mechanical stuff. The idea is you have your fingers, which move the fastest, but they're also the weakest. You have the wrist, which moves a little slower. It's a little more powerful, but a little slower. From the elbow, again, slower, but more powerful. And then finally from the shoulder, very powerful, but much slower. I mean, I guess you can think of your whole back as well. So there's this like scale of very, very fast fingers to much slower, but bigger and more powerful muscles. And I just don't see a way in this piece to really execute with other muscles in the right hand besides the fingers. So that's why I say going with like to the gym and just daily practicing to get the strength in your fingers up, I think is very important because you really can't, I don't think you can rely on other muscles here because this is just so very fast. It's very rare where there's a case where I can like use my arm from up here and come crashing down on a key to get more strength and more power. So you really just need very, very strong fingers, I think. The other two things I want to mention with the right hand, first of all, I really think it's important to play it all from beginning to end. I mean, as you're learning it, obviously you learned it in little pieces, but once you've learned it, it helps so much to work on not just your stamina, your endurance physically to play loud, fast for a very long period of time, but also mentally being able to just like lock in and play very fast and powerfully, relentlessly from beginning to end, I think is very important. So when I study this with the metronome, I'm really playing it from beginning to end. Maybe I have a pause like in this section. What's this, measure 17, 18? That's like a natural end of one section. So maybe you can like split up the right hand, the piece into a couple of sections, but pretty long ones. So really try to do from beginning to end. It really helps a lot. Just, I think mentally, ultimately, is what helps a lot. And then the final thing is, I think it's important to try to play this without looking. Because it is a scale, it's pretty easy to not have to look at your hand. And it's going to be very important for a lot of these big jumps in the left hand, both when you're doing the octaves and with single fingers, like you have these gigantic jumps. So I think your attention will be more to the left hand just because of the bigger leaps you have to do, which means that you don't have a lot of time to look at the right hand. Luckily, it shouldn't be all that hard because it is basically just a scale. Even these sections where you're jumping around quite a lot, like here you can see with the thumb, you're sketching out diminished seventh chord. Not too hard to do that with your eyes closed, with some practice. So that's it for the right hand. With the left hand, this is a little more complicated, and I guess the question is, how are octaves really a true building block of technique? It's an interesting question, because I'm really a classical pianist, more in the classical tradition, because I like Bach quite a lot. Octaves aren't really in my bag of tricks, but the more pop music, pop, rock, just like regular songs that I like to play that aren't classical, the more I find it important to play with octaves, especially in the right hand, to just make a melody more full. But in the left hand as well, for having just like fuller harmonies. However, in the classical romantic repertoire, octaves are so important. It's just not the sort of thing that I'm really into, the like big octave Olympics that like Rubinstein and Horowitz talked about. And like in Tchaikovsky and Rachmaninoff, a lot of Chopin as well. I'm just not really into these just like very loud, fast octaves. But it is an important building block of technique to have. So I can't really talk too much about octave technique. It's one of those things that's so basic, you really just should be doing it with a teacher. But I want to make a couple of points. First of all, just if you haven't already learned this from your teacher or from your studies, with these very loud octaves, it's pretty impossible to do this just with your fingers. So playing octaves from the wrist or from the whole arm, I guess not the whole arm, it's really more from the elbow. I mean, eventually from the whole arm as well if you're playing like super, super loud. But octaves really require you to play with a loose but powerful wrist, okay? Right, so I was doing everything comes from the wrist and a bit from the elbow as well. I mentioned that the wrist and the elbow are slower than the fingers, and that's definitely true, but you can still play pretty quickly. I guess the reason is because just like with a little bit of movement from your elbow is enough to cover these pretty big distances, so that therefore you can play it pretty fast. An important thing to note, especially at the beginning where you're not playing in octaves, is to resist the temptation to not play just with the pinky. Notice how I have these like really big jumps with the pinky, especially like here. Or here, on this F7 chord. Really work on just playing with the pinky and realize that at the end of the day, this is really still just octave techniques. In the same way that you might use octaves to jump like this, you're doing the same thing, except you're only playing the bottom part of the octave with the pinky. It helps to practice octaves focusing on the pinky. Usually when I play octaves with the left hand, I'm focusing and leading with the thumb. That's really where I'm, that's like the bullseye, where I'm really paying attention to, and the pinky just falls into place. I actually find it very difficult to look and lead with the pinky in the left hand, but it's very important. The same is true for the right hand in the inverse way. So if you're practicing, for example, scales and arpeggios in octaves, which is a very important thing for this piece, lead with the pinky, like pay attention to the pinky, and make sure it's powerful, make sure it hits where it needs to hit, and then it will be that much easier to do these big jumps. Just like that. So that's it for the left hand. I guess if it wasn't already clear, just like with the right hand when you're going to the gym and just slowly building up the tempo and just working on having powerful fingers, powerful, the whole arm apparatus. Same thing with the octaves. Just practice octave arpeggios, octave scales, slowly ramp up the tempo, make sure you're playing loudly and powerfully, and the speed will come. So that's it for the technique in this piece. Like I said, not a whole lot of secrets. Again, difficult to execute, but at least it's kind of easy to wrap your head around. I want to end with just a little bit of memorization tips because there is quite a lot of of notes here. And the thing is, as usual, just memorizing the harmony isn't all that difficult. I mean, we got on the 1 chord, this is B flat minor. We go to the 4 chord, that's the E flat minor, and then we go to a diminished seventh chord, and this acts like the dominant, right? This is the diminished 7th that acts as the dominant, which is F7 of B flat minor. So figuring out the chords using the left hand is pretty easy. The trick then is with the right hand to see the chord in the right hand. And let me give just a couple of examples. I mean, right at the beginning, they're pretty obvious. This is just a B flat melodic minor scale, right? This is B flat minor. And B flat melodic minor is like this. But besides that, a couple of examples. So at measures 6 and 7, right, notice how on the downbeat, we're sketching out a B flat minor, a D flat major chord. Now, what D flat major has to do with E flat minor, I'm not sure. I mean, I guess it's this would be a 13th, right? 7, 9, 11. It's like a E flat minor 11 chord. But it helps to know that, okay, I'm gonna hit these notes which spell out a D flat major chord. A similar thing happens at measures 22 and 23 when we do the same thing. We repeat, except now instead of E flat minor, we have the diminished chord. So you can see this F flat. Same thing, D flat minor. Another example, measures 10, right, 10 and 12. Oh, okay, so in this section, when we do, notice how the left hand plays a diminished chord to the B flat minor. So this is the diminished 7th chord that acts as an F7, which is the dominant of B flat minor. So we basically got dominant, tonic, dominant, tonic, okay? When on the tonic, on the B flat, notice how notice how on the, I guess the offbeat, the 2nd, 4th, 16th notes, we've got 3 notes from the B flat minor scale. I don't know how much this helps, but to me it actually did help. Okay, so we moved up in the, this is pretty clearly from a diminished 7th. Right? Notice how we're hitting notes from the diminished scale, from the diminished chord. And then when we go to the B flat minor, that's an F from B flat minor, E flat from the B flat minor scale, and D flat from the B flat minor chord. The same exact thing happens. This is the pattern in the next section when we do. We have the same thing. We have a diminished seventh, which acts as G7, the dominant of C minor. So that's what you get from these chords. Pretty clear, right? This is clearly a C minor, and this is clearly a diminished seventh, and this is the diminished seventh that acts as the dominant of C minor. And sure enough, in the right hand, look at this. Okay, notice how the second and fourth 16th notes sketch out these notes from the C minor chord or the C minor scale. Another one is, where was it? Ah, yeah, pretty similarly on measure 28, 29, same thing when we go to F sharp major and B minor, right? This is F sharp 7 is the dominant of B minor. And then when we repeat a whole step down, E7 to A minor, the right hand does something pretty similar. So on the F sharp major, whoops. Am I? Right. By the way that I remembered this one, this scale, well, I guess I failed to remember it here, is on the downbeat, we always have a black note, and then we move a half step up to a white note, right? Okay, and then on the B minor, notice how, again, we're sketching out 3 notes on the second and fourth 16th note, 3 notes from the B minor scale, B minor chord. And the same thing happens in the next section, right, with the E7 and A minor. And the last example is on measure 14. Last example that I'm giving you, but they're all over the place. I'm just giving you some ideas for how you can like find the chord from the left hand in the right hand notes. All right, measure 14 and onwards, where we're on a B flat major. All right, do. Notice how we then move to a diminished 7th chord. So B flat, D major, D flat major, and when the left hand moves to this diminished chord, the right hand does the same thing. And then we go back to B, D flat major, and then on this other diminished chord, again, we're just sketching it out. So you can apply this sort of technique throughout the whole piece, and you get the hang of the right hand pretty quickly. It's really not that difficult. Okay, so that was it for this piece. Really, really awesome. If you haven't, by the way, seen it make the rounds on social media, I think there's some people who started doing it like in a jazzy version. They're kind of like swinging the right hand, and it sounds very cool. And I saw another one making the rounds, like speed running this piece, and I think it was Evgeny Kissin whose speed is just out of this world. He's like Hamelin, like so many great and famous pianists. And I think he plays this in what, like, is it a minute or less than a minute? I don't know, but it's ludicrously fast. It's just so fast. So go take a look at those, and they're very cool. Okay, hope you enjoyed the episode. I'll see you in the next one. Have a good one.